This is Curious Minnesota, a Star Tribune project that sends staff from the state's largest newsroom hunting for the answers to great questions we receive from you, our readers. We're here to answer everything you want to know about the state's people, places, and culture.
Welcome to Curious Minnesota. I'm your host, Erica Pearson. This episode of Curious Minnesota is sponsored by the Minnesota Historical Society and Primrose Schools. Today's show is about how the small Minnesota town of Motley, despite being so far from the ocean, became home to seafood plants that process millions of pounds of imitation crab. More than 500 people work in the seafood business in Motley, and it turns out that the industry has a fascinating origin story that stretches back nearly a century. This question came to us from John Beck, who noticed the seafood plants when driving through Motley on a trip up to Itasca State Park a few years ago. Here's John.
I noticed the name Trident on the company, and that's one of the companies I know processes seafood because I see that logo on the Deadliest Catch. Why was there a big fish processing facility in Motley, Minnesota, which is in the middle of North America, far from any ocean? Seems like a long way to bring in seafood to process. That's what triggered my curiosity.
Thanks so much to John for this great question. I'm here today with my colleague Brooks Johnson. Brooks, welcome.
Thank you.
It's good to have you here. So when I saw this question, I thought of you right away because of your beat here at the Minnesota Star Tribune. Can you talk a little bit about what you cover for us?
Yeah, I cover the food industry broadly. That's like General Mills, Hormel Foods, and then agribusinesses like Cargill, Land O'Lakes. Also throw 3M in there, so manufacturing. But yeah, food. I cover the business of food.
Very cool beat. It's one of those that is one of the most intriguing, I think.
I get to do a lot of taste testing. Let's just put it that way.
Very cool. So I love John's question that we're talking about today because it's one that I've wondered myself when driving north. I have family in Bemidji and we drive past, see the fish, and I know we probably have a lot of listeners who've been wondering as well. But for those who haven't seen it, can you describe what it looks like as you're coming through Motley? I know you were just up there reporting on this.
Yeah, absolutely. So you're driving Highway 10, beautiful stretch of the state, north of St. Cloud, and you're heading up. It's about to crook west. But before it does, you enter the small town of Motley in Morrison County, and you're struck by this giant seafood plant that says Trident Seafoods. And that's a Seattle-based company, which many know, and actually John knew, of course, from Dangerous Catch. And then right next to it is a smaller operation, but older, and that's Morey Seafood. It's got the big fish sign, and now it says Riches because that's their current owner, but it's been there for decades, the fish as well.
Yes, and it turns out that the tale of how this industry came to be located in Motley involves a little bit of chance and a lot of ambition, and you heard the tale from the founder's son himself. And also, if you could let us know who the founder is and what's the story, what did you learn?
Yeah, so the founder was Ed Morey, and he was a 28-year-old local logger and farmer in Motley, and he was helping out a fisherman one day whose truck had broken down on the way back from Lake of the Woods. He was going to sell his catch in the Twin Cities. And back then, you packed your fish on ice, and by the time they could fix the truck, that fish was going to spoil. So Ed Morey, he said, hey, I've got some produce. I've got some corn. I'll trade you some corn for your load of fish, and I'll see what I can do with them. And so the fisherman said, yeah, okay, I have no other options really for this. And he managed to sell all that fish in the surrounding communities within a day. I mean, none of it spoiled. So that got him thinking maybe I could go back up and get some more fish and keep doing this. And that started a decades-long career in the seafood industry for him.
Yeah, and after that, Ed Morey, he wasn't just doing fresh fish. He went into the smoked fish business, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Unsuccessfully at first, I should add. In 1938, so a year after this first encounter, this chance encounter that changed Ed Morey's life, he built a smoker, a little smokehouse, and he burned it down the first time he tried to use it. It didn't happen again after that. He never burned down his own smokehouse after that, and it was a very, very successful business line for him. But yeah, he learned from failure, and he was a hard charging guy, according to his son, and so he just kept at it no matter what challenges came up, even burning down his first enterprise. But yeah, the smoked fish, smoked salmon especially, eventually, I should say, a lot of it was really just local fish at the time he started with. And he eventually branched out over the decades into, Morey's is really known for salmon now. And so that became a huge part of their business. You know, he went up to Alaska several times, and he would adventure in northern Canadian lakes as well. And I really wish I could have met the guy, because just an adventurous spirit.
Very cool. And how did the company evolve once his son, Loren Morey, got involved in the family business?
Yeah, so Loren Morey, you know, as he tells me, he was always kind of destined to join the family business, but he did go off and serve in the Navy and then go to Hamlin in St. Paul before heading back in, I believe, 1964. He came back and started running things and said, you know, there's about a dozen employees, you know, at Morey's at the time. And he thought, I think we could do a little better than that. And it was always his ambition to provide this like employment base for Motley. You know, that's what really struck me. He like really cared about Motley. You know, it's been his home, except for the times when he was away in the Navy and at school. And he said, you know, I think eventually we could probably get a couple hundred people here. You know, the town of Motley's got 300 people. What if we employed 300 people? And so part of that was, yes, growing Morey's and just expanding sales to grocery stores, right? You know, they were still operating a retail storefront, which is still there today. And they thought they could do more. And they did very quickly over the decades to follow.
Thanks, Brooks. And we'll get into that after the break. We'll be right back.
At Primrose, our balanced learning approach means exploring academic skills and life skills, combining purposeful play with nurturing guidance from teachers, and setting children up for success in future classrooms. Learn more at primroseschools.com/Twin Cities.
History doesn't only exist in the pages of a book. History exists all around us. You just have to dare to look. Listen to Minnesota Unraveled, a podcast from the Minnesota Historical Society. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.
Okay, so tell us about how Morey's expanded. It wasn't just smoked fish anymore, right?
Yeah, so they got into smoked fish, they got into, you know, marinating salmon, they did lots of different cuts, they did lots of different types of fish, tulaby, whitefish, around the lakes, around the world. They did scallops at one point too. I heard a very interesting story about how they had to go get scallops, and we're in some danger at one point.
Let's hear it. What happened?
His business partner. Well, yeah, they were down in the Baja California, where a lot of scallops come from, and they were trying to find a new supplier because there's this whole mess in Massachusetts. And they were there with kind of a fixer, and they're like, okay, like how much can we trade? They were on a boat with some guys who were just like opening them up with their knives. Apologies for readers who actually know the terms for the tools. But they were talking, they're like, okay, this is good. And then, you know, the folks on the boat were just looking at each other, just mumbling at each other. And they asked their translator, like, what are they saying? It's like, well, they think you're with the government, and they're just talking about which one of you they're going to kill first. And it's like, whoa, all right, we have a deal. See you later. I mean, the seafood business is a world of adventure, or has been over the decades for them. I mean, that was just such a story. I mean, that's just one of many. And that, again, was Loren Morey, the founder's son, who got into some scrapes while he was sourcing seafood. Yeah,
I love it. There's different types of fishing stories, I guess.
Yeah. But the biggest thing, the biggest thing they got into was something called surimi. And this is like a processed fish paste that came out of Japan. It really quickly commercialized in the 70s and 80s, and really wasn't anything in the United States until Loren Morey said, let's take a chance on this.
So what is it? I've had this probably, right? I've eaten this?
Yes. I mean, it's imitation crab. So surimi, they're kind of synonymous. Surimi is like the main ingredient in imitation crab. It's just a mixture of pollock or other whitefish with some flavorings, some additives. It's a little sweetness and a little bit of crab to give it that nice, cheap, fake crab flavor, you know, imitation crab. And I should say not cheap, but inexpensive. A lot of the imitation crab you're going to eat is made in Motley. I mean, it local, right? It comes from, you know, Alaska or the Pacific Ocean or other waters originally, but it is processed and made to the tune of, you know, 100 million pounds a year up to. It's crazy. So you've had it before, and it's that kind of white with the red streak on there. And any like kind of sushi you might get, especially from, say, Cover Target, that's going to have it.
Yes, I've seen it there. And I think there's like a Minnesota dish that's kind of like a crab salad, seafood salad.
Crab salad, crab dip, kind of.
Heavy on the mayonnaise, often imitation crabs in that, I think.
So Morey's sold to International Multifoods a since dissolved Minneapolis company, big food company that had a few brands back in the 70s, 80s. In the mid-80s, he said, hey, let's build this plant. Let's get out in front of this. I think there's demand here. And Motley Foods, who was actually about to exit the seafood business and sell the company, was like, okay, we'll do it. And they spent several million, built this big plant, and the first year was kind of a flop. It wasn't quite like burn down your first smokehouse flop, but they made more product than they sold. But quickly they found some customers. Taco Bell was called out as like an initial customer that they could rely on and did for many years.
Yeah, that's a big one.
Yeah. And so this quickly hired, 100 plus people and over the years. And now, together, both of these plants, it met the goal of employing the community. There's about 500 employees between Morey's and now Trident Seafoods, which has been owned by a couple different corporations over the years.
Got it. So if you can bring us up to today, so is Morey's still family owned at all?
Kind of. They're owned by Rich Products Corporation, which is a family-owned company. They make a lot of sort of like store brand, private label items across like bakeries, pizza, and seafood. They already owned CPAC. And so when you find Morey's products now, most of them have this like CPAC label on top. CPAC, Morey's. And their main focus is the marinated salmon that became really popular over the years. And Costco and Sam's Club just love it, and they sell a ton of it. And so that's their main account. They also do like private label, like grocery store brands, which you could just kind of assume like, is that a Cub brand salmon? That might be Morey's. So that's the main thing. And then Trident Seafood, based in Seattle, that's a big fish presence, and they have a huge, operations in Alaska. And so that they are separate. And I should say too that the retail storefront of Morey's, when you're stopping there, that is actually separately owned from the Morey seafood plant. And that is still family owned by the Franks, longtime partners in the business.
Super interesting. And history is still a part of the brand, right?
Oh, big time. More than a couple times when I was talking to Lauren Morey, he choked up. He's just so proud of what they built and how many people they were able to employ. I remember him telling me, especially as that surimi plant was starting up, he drove through town and he could see the change happening. He could see like wealth being generated. There was a home of an employee, and he saw that they were fixing up their front porch. And then later on, they were adding on to it again. Like, it was happening. He was growing the local economy. He could see it with his own eyes, other than just the day in, day out processing fish. It was really cool. And then now, of course, he and his dad had pictures on the boxes, and he picked one up and was like, I can't believe we're on there. Like all these years later, we're on the box.
Let's hear a little bit from your interview with Lauren. You were able to talk to him about that moment. Here he is.
I went through Costco, and I always look to see if Morey's marinated salmon is still in the case. And it was. I took the box out and I turned it over. There was a picture. It's myself and Dad up for a box in Costco today.
Okay, so you were able to visit the spring. Tell us a little bit about what you saw. What does it look like inside? What did you get to see and watch?
Yeah, I didn't get to go all the way back into the operation, the bowels of the operation. It's very secretive what they do. And of course, Trident next door would love to know what they're doing inside. And so, because they compete on some products. But I did get to go in, through the bustling packed retail shop. And that is, I should call out the cherry smoked salmon was just the best I've ever had. And I've eaten a lot of smoked salmon.
Good to know.
There is a lot of good seafood and fresh and smoked and everything in between. And then you wander back, it's a sprawling complex. And, from what I could peek through some of the windows, there's a lot of automation. There's a lot of machinery, a lot of stainless steel. Of course, they keep it very clean. They have hundreds of people coming in, multiple shifts, and they process the fish, whether they get it kind of pre-cut or as whole fish. They come in, they take care of it, yeah.
Did anything else stand out to you when you were there?
I think people are just really happy to share their story, and they're glad that the Minnesota Star Tribune took an interest. We've written about them over the years. I got to dig through, our archives through various kind of high points and low points of their story. And, they're in growth mode right now, and they're getting investment from their new corporate owners, Rich just came in about 2020 to run the show after they were owned by private equity for a little bit. And so there's excitement, and there's a lot of, like a lot of these small businesses, there's a lot of longtime employees, a lot of local pride. And what I noticed is that, it's it's a very Minnesota thing.
Did you get any interesting feedback from readers?
Just people who are glad to hear, oh, that's what that is. Okay, thank you. And other folks who have a connection, who actually, one reader said, actually my relative of mine sold fish to Morey's at one point, and they would smoke it and sell it. And so, there is a long-standing connection. And of course, the business has shifted over time. There's not the lake fish anymore. There's not the smoked fish anymore, and that stuff had to be cut. But the memory remains, and it's a strong one.
I'm curious whether the Minnesota companies that you visited for Curious, and you went to Spam, to Old Dutch, and then Morey's, if they have anything in common.
Yeah, it's this sense of Minnesota exceptionalism that draws, I think, readers, listeners to our stories. This, it can't happen anywhere else. And also this pride that it did happen here. It's really a Minnesota story, trading a crate of corn for a load of fish. And then look at what happened after that. Hundreds of people is employed, hundreds of millions of dollars, if not billions by now in sales over the decades. And it's we did that, There's that sense of ownership of that, state pride in these things, in these stories that start so small from these little seeds, pun intended, and grow into things like Green Giant, that grow into things like Spam. And it's just, you love to see it.
Well, I love that you're able to tell these stories so well for us, Brooke. So thanks so much for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
All right, that's it for today's show. You can read all of our Curious Minnesota stories online at startribune.com/curious. Thanks, as always, to Matt Gilmer for editing this podcast. If you've got feedback for us or a question you'd like us to answer, just send a note to curious@startribune.com.
Thanks for listening to Curious Minnesota. We want to hear from you. Ask questions and read more stories online at startribune.com/curious. Our show is recorded at the Star Tribune's headquarters in beautiful downtown Minneapolis, and our music is produced by Matt Gilmer. If you like the show, please rate us on iTunes or leave a review. And until next time, stay curious.